The following reincarnation case involved a physician and his wife from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in the 1950s. The case was studied by the well-known Canadian-born American psychiatrist Professor Ian Stevenson, who was the founder and director of the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia School of Medicine and professor at the University of Virginia School of Medicine for 50 years, until his death in 2007. During the sessions, the couple had wished to remain anonymous and used the names Ken and Tanya. Other than practicing mainstream medicine, Ken had learned to do hypnosis in 1954 and would practice on his wife, who he found to be a good subject. To be hypnotized requires a complete faith and trust in the hypnotist, and if it is lacking, the subject will probably not respond. Ken conducted the sessions with his wife from 1955 to 1956, and after a few sessions, something inexplicable happened when a new personality appeared to emerge from his wife. Whilst under hypnosis, his wife started to speak Swedish, which was a language that neither Ken nor Tanya knew. Neither of the couple had any Swedish roots, where Tanya was born in Philadelphia, and English was the only language that she knew. Even though her parents were Jewish and born in Odessa, a port city on the Black Sea in southern Ukraine, nobody in her family had ever been to Scandinavia, and they knew no one who could speak Swedish, and Tanya nor her husband had ever been to Sweden. Professor Stevenson studied their case in detail and even had 3 different Swedish people listen to Tanya whilst under hypnosis, and they said that her accent was that of a natural Swedish speaker. The Swedish people even signed statements confirming that the language Tanya was speaking was indeed Swedish. How could a woman who had never been to Sweden or learned Swedish suddenly be able to speak fluent Swedish? Professor Stevenson then had the tape recordings analysed by Swedish linguistic experts, and they confirmed that Tanya was speaking fluent Swedish as if she was having a normal conversation. The experts were also willing to testify that Tanya was speaking an excellent form of Swedish that they identified as Middle Swedish. All in all, Professor Stevenson had counted a vocabulary of over 100 Swedish words that Tanya had spoken. How did this woman know so many Swedish words and speak them fluently? Both Tanya and Ken were willing to undergo lie detector tests in order to rule out any fraud, and each passed the polygraph tests. Finally, Professor Ian Stevenson determined that what Tanya had said on hypnosis was a positive case of responsive xenoglossy, in which she was able to carry on a conversation in Swedish but had never learned the language before. When Tanya was first hypnotized, she was regressed back to a lifetime where she, along with a group of old people, were being forced into the water, where Tanya had the sensation of being hit on the head, resulting in severe pain. This caused Tanya much stress, and her husband was forced to end the session and immediately brought her out of the hypnotic state. For the following 2 days, Tanya experienced head pain and would regularly feel her head looking for a lump. In another session, her husband told her to go back 10 years before the episode in which she was struck on the head. Tanya then spoke in English, but in a deep masculine voice, "I am a man." He said that his name was Jensen Jacoby, and he was a farmer. During 1955 and 1956, Tanya had 8 sessions where Jensen Jacoby came through on each one. Surprisingly, in the first 5 sessions, Jensen Jacoby could understand and reply in English. However, his English was awkward and spoke with a heavy Swedish accent. He could also speak and understand Norwegian. In the 6th and 8th sessions, Jensen spoke only in Swedish. At the end of each session, Tanya claimed to have had no memory of what had happened to her under hypnosis whenever Jensen appeared. Jensen Jacoby also described where he lived, which was a small village called Morby-Hagar that was close to a harbour town called Havero. Another nearby town was called Torhaven. Although there is not a town called Morby-Hagar, there is a town called Morby in Sweden. There was also a town called Havero. But that is over 3 hours away, so it was not close, unless in those days a 3-hour journey was considered close. There is no town called Torhaven, but there is a town called Turo, but again, this is also a great distance away. It appears that Jensen had lived about 300 or 400 years ago, so the names of towns over the years could have changed or varied somewhat. Jensen said that he raised cows, horses, goats and chickens. He baked bread and made goat's cheese. He said that he would take good produce to be sold at Havero, a town with a sea harbour. Occasionally his family would eat salmon, which probably came from the harbour town, when delivering his goods. Jensen said that he was one of 3 sons and his wife's name was Latvia. His wife made poppy seed cakes and poppy seed juice. They had no children. Jensen said that he'd built his own stone house. He would often hunt for bears and liked to drink at a tavern. Jensen also said that he was a Christian. In another session, when Jensen was speaking Swedish, he did a comical impersonation of a drunken man at an inn trying to sing. He became emotional when he was shown a picture of a horse, as it reminded him of home. Jensen was able to discuss things about Sweden from previous centuries, and when he was shown a model of a Swedish 17th century sailing ship, he quickly named it a skuta or skut. He was also able to name a Swedish container that was used to measure grain. When he was shown a picture of a wolf, he called it vag, which is Swedish for wolf. However, when he was shown a modern tool such as pliers, he was unable to name it. Jensen said that he hated warfare and had a fear of Russians. When they asked him how his life ended, he said that he was involved in a fight with enemies and was forced into a body of water and received a blow to the back of the head, which apparently killed him. This corresponds to the memory that Tanya had experienced when she was first put under hypnosis, where she claimed she was struck on the head, followed by a subsequent headache, which made her search for a lump on her head. After the many regressive sessions, Professor Stevenson rejected any idea that fraud was involved and concluded that Jensen Jacobi had once lived on the west coast of Sweden near Norway in the 17th century. However, as Tanya had no memory of what had happened whenever Jensen appeared, it raises the question of whether this was a case of reincarnation or of possession by a discarnate spirit. Either way, Professor Stevenson said that the case represented strong evidence for the survival of personality after death. Finally, Professor Stevenson did come to the conclusion that he felt the case was more than likely reincarnation rather than possession, and posed the following question. If Jensen was a discarnate spirit, why would Jensen Jacobi, a Christian Swedish spirit from the 17th century, show up in Philadelphia in 1955 speaking through a Jewish woman of Russian descent?